Hey everyone, Walter Crosby of Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's episode, my guest is CEO, visionary. He owns multiple companies, all in the financial space. We talk a little bit about FinElevate, his company, what they can do to help that CEO, that business owner who, income statement, but knows that there's just like a lot of numbers there and there's some things that just don't feel right and they're not really sure. They don't have time to dig into it. Numbers aren't their bag. And they're not CPAs in the sense that they're going to go do your tax returns, but they're going to help you know which levers to pull to fix cash flow or create better margins or help you fix those things that are going to help you scale. It's going to help you increase margins, it's going to help you exit, whatever that is. And they have a really cool approach to the business. And we talk about some really powerful ideas about what we can be doing to get out of our own way. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Colin, welcome to Sales and Cigars. Appreciate you taking a little time to come on and have a conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Walter.
We've had this one on the books, and I had to punt once, so I appreciate you reschedule it for me.
No worries.
So let me. I like to start off. Kind of gives a little insight into how people think. You're business owner, multiple business owners, visionary. Is there a book that you recommend or gift more often than not?
Yeah, I've got two actually that I love. One is The Obstacles Away by Ryan Holiday. It's an amazing book for the natural challenges life throws at us. And the other one is called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's Ben Horowitz, and that one is fantastic. I mean, that's a raw look at what it really takes to run a company, and not the shiny, glossy version, but the real raw version,
the ugly underbelly.
Absolutely, yep.
It's sort of like, you really think you want to run a company? You really think you want to do this? Like, here's the glory is there, but there's some bumpiness you got to go through.
Yeah, the glory's on the other side of all of this. I love that.
Oh, and yuck. Yeah, those are two great books. I actually have those over on my shelf over there. I'm a fan of Holiday's stuff. He's a prolific writer, but that book kind of helps people understand that, whatever you think is in your way, which is usually right up here in between our ears, that's what we got to fix. And then we can get past that, or get out of our own way, we can win. So
absolutely.
So if you could share a story or like how you've turned something negative or a business struggle or failure and you turned it around and learned from it and had success. If you read those books, you probably have a bunch of those, but give me one that would be maybe useful to the audience.
Yeah. So that, The Obstacles Away, I polish it off at least once a year. Anytime I'm running into something that's a challenge. COVID hit, I own a manufacturing company that's focused in the airline space. So the minute that book, or the minute that whole situation started to really go south and we saw the very obvious impact it was going to have on air travel, very first thing I did was went for a long walk, pulled out the audiobook and dove back in. So definitely what I would recommend. And I think what I've realized, and this is what I always tell people, is looking backward, we always see that some of our biggest challenges became some of our greatest opportunities or biggest breakthroughs. But in the moment, it's really hard to see that. And, I remember being a young guy, getting started in my career. My very first company was a turnaround. And I didn't, know it was a turnaround. I wasn't going to it because it was a turnaround. It's just a business that I ended up working for that was doing very poorly. And I always wanted back then, like, man, if I could just have the right mentor who could show me what to do, like how fast could I move? And looking back, of course, I realized, nothing was better than the mentor of the hard knocks, right? And, that's kind of what The Hard Thing About Hard Things touches on. And that's really what, Ryan Holiday is talking about, is recognizing in that moment, Like, hey, this sucks, but this is going to be the path. It's going to take me where I really want to go.
There's a couple of books I reread, once a year, but when you're listening to that book or reading it the second time or third time or fourth time, is there a different spot in the book that like, oh yeah, I don't, that's a new little tidbit, or that's, even though we've read it, right? Do you pull something new out of it each time?
Every single time. I mean, I love what you're talking about, because that has blown me away. I don't understand. There's got to be some sort of a name for that. But yeah, absolutely. It's like it just strikes in a different way based on where you're at in that moment, what's going on, what led up to you revisiting that work. But that happens with every book that I read. I mean, and you're kind of going like, how did I miss this? Where was this, last time? Obviously it was right there. It just didn't strike.
It's almost like we're ready to hear the thing when our mind is open to it, right? And we need to hear it. It was there before. We heard it. It's in the mind. Yep. We just don't always recall it. But then, boom. So yeah, I mean, I think having that's a really good piece of advice, to really go back. I never thought about it from that perspective. Find those key books that resonate and do it again.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me, there's an old saying, I don't know where it came from, but something to the effect of, when the student is ready, the teacher will emerge. And it's basically exactly what you're saying, right? I mean, that can happen within a single book that you've read 3 or 4 times.
And it's like when we were kids, right? The parents told us something, and I used to get from my parents like, how many times do I have to tell you?
Yeah.
Right? And I learned that the smartass answer of 6 was not a helpful answer coming from a child to your parent. They didn't appreciate my humor.
Yeah.
But it's like that. You got to hear it until it really, it resonates with you. So I think I'm going to take that idea and go back and look at the books I reread, and then kind of categorize them as to when I should be looking at those and when I should pull them out, right? Because you say you run into a thing and then you go for the walk and you listen to the book, and you're open to it. I think that's a great takeaway from this conversation already. That's awesome. So in your space, and we'll get to talking a little bit about the strategic accounting services and how that's different than just a regular CPA. But what do you hear in your space that is just awful advice that pisses you off, right? But it's coming from all these so-called gurus, right? In my world, it's like cold calling is dead, or emailing is dead, or whatever, right? Somebody's like, it's dead, and it's like, nothing's dead, nothing works, everything works. You just got to be good at it and use it effectively and consistently. Is there anything like that comes out of your space? You don't have to name names or anything, but
yeah. No, I think to your point, right? It's the same thing in sales. The idea that one particular idea doesn't work is almost never true. The idea that one idea will work instantly with very little work is also not true, right? And so that's the big thing is, teaching people that it's not a silver bullet that's going to solve all your problems. That's really, kind of why we created the company. Is the problems that need to be solved in this world that are actually valuable when they're solved, they take a while. They take work. They take knowledge. They take expertise, and they take somebody being willing to try and fail and reiterate what worked and what didn't, and go after it again. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a very similar concept of there's not a one magical decision that if you made it, it would fix your finances, just like it won't fix your sales.
Yeah. Well, and there's people who are looking for the magic bullet. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry, the weight loss industry, they live on that. Like, this is it. We figured it out. We broke the code. This is going to work. And some of them get closer or not, but everybody's body chemistry is different. So there's no perfect answer. But I think that point that it takes time You didn't get here in a minute. You're not going to fix it. And one of the things I like to do with a customer is, you get them to the finish line and they're excited about starting and they want to do the transformation and they show you the desire and they have the commitment to do it. Like, I like to get them to that point, and it's like, all right, let me tell you why this isn't going to work. And you watch the body language go, what? And like, it can work, but let me tell you why it won't work.
I love that.
If you make a decision about 45 days in, somebody's going to come to you and they're going to say, this guy's crazy. He wants us to do things we've never done before. He's asking us to be accountable for our actions. He's asking us to try different things and different messaging, right? He doesn't want us to talk about the product. He wants us to talk about, the problems that we have, right? So when that happens, what are you going to say? And then I like rehearse it with them because it's going to happen. It always happens. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 60, but somebody comes in to that person's office and says, crazy guy, got to get rid of him. And it's amazing that they come to me around that time frame and say, hey, remember that conversation we had? Like when I thought you were nuts? And like, yeah. And he's like, well, that happened. And I'm like, yeah, let me guess. It was Steve that came to you, right? Yeah. How'd you know? Been doing this a while. I know,
Yep.
Can read people.
Seen a lot of Steves.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's I think it's one of those things that being committed to the transformation and the bumpy ride that it's going to be, we'll get there, but it's going to be like a little bumpy from time to time. And some things will work great and some things won't. And we'll have to, talk about it, iterate, and keep moving forward. And that happens, I think that happens anywhere. Anytime you're trying to make change, there's always going to be some bumpiness.
Absolutely.
What do you guys experience when at Fin Elevate, your company? Like, what types of things do they want to solve immediately that take months or quarters to get done? Is there anything in particular that pops to mind?
Yeah, I mean, addressing really any of the major foundational elements of the financial side of your business are much like the sales piece, right? There's an element of kind of decision making. That's the easy part. There's also an element of behavior and sustained behaviors, right? So to your point, whether we're talking about working with a client about helping them on their pricing, if we're trying to fix cash flow is the easy one that I always use, right? If we're talking about, improving your cash flow, I can't just give you a secret sauce and all of a sudden it works. We can't just do one round of follow-ups on, the outstanding invoices that haven't been paid, or make one little tweak to your process and all of a sudden cash flow goes away. It's going to take several months for it to play out. And exactly like you're saying, I love what you said. I always call that moment the wobble. I kind of say, hey, we're going to try something new. There's a bit of a balance to it. And we all have to acknowledge on the front end, at some point, this thing is going to wobble. The question is not whether it'll wobble. The question is whether you're going to double down or you're going to use the wobble as the excuse that it doesn't work. And exactly to your point. I mean, I think taking it even a step further is like, hey, who's going to point to the wobble? Who's going to be Steve, right? Who's going to point to the wobble and say, see, that's it. I told you it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Let's stop. And,
right.
The reality is that's why, just like what you're doing, there are best practices that are unquestionably the right way to do things. And I think if those aren't your expertise, just like what you help companies with, we help companies with being kind of the co-pilot on their financial journey. But we're not telling them to get wild and crazy and do something creative, right? We're not like, take all your money out of the bank and put it over here. These are pretty standard, but because of that, they're not sexy. Because of that, they're not that exciting always. The ultimate results, the compounding results, are really exciting. But in the short term, there's always like, is this really working or not?
Yeah, guys like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett have certain things they look for. There's certain levers they know they can pull. They are able to look at a company and understand certain things, and they know they can pull these 3 levers and it'll get them this point, right? All things being equal. And that's what we do. We look at those things and we can tell them that, you know, it's going to be bumpy to get there. I love the wobble idea, right? And if you're going to double down or throw in the towel, and it happens more and more these days. People want something fixed, yesterday, and it's literally not possible, unless you got a magic wand, and I haven't seen one of those in my time on the planet. I've just never seen it work. But it's the levers, it's the time, it's the commitment, it's the consistency, right? Alex Hormozy talks about 100 days doing the same thing in a row. Like if you're running ads, $10 a day for 100 days in a row, and just A and B test your ass off, but keep doing it until you figure out what the right combo is, and then double down on what's working, right? But keep checking and testing. And I think that's that's one of the things that I ask guests. I ask CEOs when we're talking on the podcast and just in general. It's like, what's results matter, right? Everybody cares about results, but is it short-term fix, or is it long-term outcomes? And when you listen to that answer, they lean in a direction because they know it's the right answer, but you can tell in their answer, if you let them talk long enough, they really, like, I got to have this fixed tomorrow, and I got to have this fixed, by the end of the quarter. And, you screwed this up. It took you 3 years to get to this level of, dysfunction. We gotta work through it. And it doesn't mean it's going to take 3 years to fix, but you're going to need some time. And I think, in my world, we got levers we pull in that. You have levers that you can pull to fix cash flow. I'm curious your experience with CEOs that are visionaries. Like, do you have to work on them having good business / financial acumen? Like, do they know how to read an income statement? Do they know how to read a P&L? Do they understand what goes into reoccurring revenue? Like, is that something that is there and you just work off of, or do you got to help educate them typically?
I think they're at all different levels, but you're hitting on a really valid point that is part of why we exist. Is most business owners that I've run into, and I know hundreds of business owners through mastermind groups and just doing this for a long time. But they're almost always really passionate about their product. They're almost always pretty good at sales, or at least transferring that passion they have into, winning over clients, right? They may not have the team with the best habits, just like what I'm sure you run into. But typically their financial acumen is kind of lagging behind. Not always, but most of the time. And where that really starts to hurt them is as they start to grow and they get beyond just being able to say, like, I have a little bit of money in the bank, therefore I'm good. And they get into a more complex business where they've got to understand the profitability of their offers and how well their team is leveraged. They get beyond kind of the super basic solopreneur model. And now it's not just them, but they're not able to help their team understand those elements. And so that's a huge part of what we do, is not only work with the entrepreneur or business owner, we also work with the team, right? We've got to kind of step up the acumen across the board. And it doesn't mean everybody has to get, a degree in finance. But I know that's not exciting to most people. But you have to understand the implications of, what you're doing sales-wise, right? You can't just go sell anything. You've got to know that you're selling the most profitable products, the area of the business that's the most scalable, filling in excess capacity, et cetera, right? All things that I know you know as an experienced, executive in this world. But a lot of small businesses are, it's their first time, or they've never had to do this financial part of the business. And a lot of times they build a team of experts in a really thin portion of the business, but not a lot of broad general management experience.
Yeah, and I see that with engineers, like super smart people in a very narrow area. And if they surround themselves with people that they can trust and provide the right guardrails, they can keep them on the path that they need to be on. Um, but I see that. I was curious because what I see a lot of is salespeople don't have the basic business acumen to have a quantify the problem conversation, right?
Yep.
And because they don't have the ability to do that, their sales cycles extend, their win rates drop. They're selling on price, right? But if you can help somebody see that and walk them through the process of like, what is that costing you? How does that affect this? What you know does that have any soft cost attached to that? Right? What and you go through that whole process. Well, we're making 20% on this product, and we're super busy. We're selling the crap out of it, but we're not making any money.
Yep.
Okay, well, what have you looked at to figure out where that hole is? Because you have a hole someplace where the money's falling out. First thing is it priced properly, right? Are your margins there to cover the taxes and the sales costs and marketing costs, all that? And are you just leaving money on the table? Is there a manufacturing problem? Right? I mean, there's just so many things that you could look at. But salespeople don't see it, and I've seen some business owners who don't know how to do it either, and they've been running a business for 15 years and they can't quantify the problem. And by the time this airs, I will have a course that I'm going to be. It's more of a facilitation of for salespeople to help them just take a framework to be able to quantify a particular problem, right? Because it falls into three buckets: time, right? Resource we never get back. So can we save them time? Can we save them or make them money? Right? Because that's one of the levers you guys are able to pull. Yep. And then risk. Can we mitigate the risk in some capacity for the products that we offer our customers? I mean, if we can't get to that and show them that that's a big number, that's so big that they would be silly not to accept to your product, then they haven't really differentiated yourself. And so it was interesting to hear that some business owners still struggle with those components, and they're using baseline ideas. So,
Yep.
And you're able to work with them and their whole team to get them to understand cash flow or understand what their real margin is, not their gross margin.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, the way we go about it is we have what we call a fin score. It's kind of think of it as a financial report card, right? And, because everybody can understand 0 to 100, like where am I on that scale? And so we've got, most businesses are in the 60s or 70s. It's not written to be everybody gets a B just for showing up. But by having that fin score, it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off of people going in. I think a lot of business owners are, especially visionaries like we talked about, they see the sea of numbers that exist on a P&L or a balance sheet, and they're just overwhelmed. There's just a lot going on. And then you start talking about how these things are interconnected, and man, they're out. And so to your point, there's people who have been doing this for 15 years who don't see that or don't get that. Much less could their team be expected to be able to understand that. And so by putting it in this 0 to 100 score, the fin score, that gives them a way they can communicate with their team. And even before their team learns what is good or bad, they can see like, hey, we're a 3 out of 5 on this area. I know that here's what it would take to get to a 4. And so we kind of demystify it in a way of getting out of the pure classic finance. And then the goal is, as they develop and they're educated, they start learning the behaviors that work. How do we move the needle? We introduce more and more of the classic, financial components, so that the business owner, or to the extent that they share with their team, the rest of the team, they step up their game, right? And that's ultimately the goal, is they become real pros.
Well, but once they understand, they can start to communicate the things that are strategic and appropriate for their departments heads and the rest of their team to know this is how you can impact, the bottom line. This is how you impact, your bonus. This is how you impact the results in general.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you guys start with a company? Like when do you insert that fin score in your model?
Yeah, so we calculate the fin score in the very first month. We're taking a lot of data out of their accounting software, but we're also, questioning the business owner and the team on some elements that are a little bit more subjective. But then our goal is everything that's subjective, we start going in and trying to validate with data, right? And so to your point, we want to give them as quickly as possible that score so they can see like, okay, where it is. And most of the time, the business owner has a kind of a gut feel for roughly where they are. They don't know the specifics, but they know, hey, my business and the cash flow is something I'm always worried about, even though I don't really understand it. They know that. So the fin score is just tied to the 4 natural goals that every business owner has. It's going to rate how they're doing in terms of growth, profitability, cash flow, and business maturity, which is what we say. Business maturity is really about being prepared to exit outside of your financials. Mm-hmm. And so based on, how they're scoring in those areas, it gives us kind of a natural, like, what's next? We don't have to ask the question, what's next? What's next is to improve the area you set as your goal and that's weakest on the fin score.
So your fin score gives them a scorecard as to where we are today. It's a measure to where you go in the future. It helps them understand the things that they don't understand. Like, yeah, your gut was right. How do we correct that? And then you start to just systematically go through there and start to solve those problems. And there's probably a lot of interconnectedness. Fix one problem makes the other problem easier to fix. I imagine that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, it all really is interconnected. It's just, and I think that's part of where the overwhelm comes from, right? If I'm looking at the sea of numbers on the balance sheet, on the P&L, and I'm kind of feeling like, hey, this is frustrating, this isn't working. Well, the reality may be that your cash flow is off because your vendor costs have gone up. And you may have aggressive payment terms with your vendors, for example. Well, if that's happening within the business, mm-hmm. You feel like a dog chasing its tail. You're kind of got this circular logic going on of why is this problem? Why is it happening now? I'm not doing anything different. I'm not, spending more money than I used to. I'm not taking money out of the bank. What's going on with this problem? Well, the answer may be on the P&L rather than the balance sheet where your cash lives. So it's just helping them see that kind of more holistic view of it. And to your point, getting it in terms that everybody can see that, hey, a 4 is better than a 2. So to get it to 4, here's the goal. Let's try and get this to 4. And then for us, we have our playbook of all the different things we could potentially do in a business. They're categorized by the fin score so that when we see that a score that you need to be a 4 is only a 2, there's a natural playbook that we go to.
And that becomes the roadmap. It becomes a guide that then you systematically can walk somebody through the steps, and it's the process, and it makes it easier for, I'm not a numbers guy. I mean, I understand some basics, but I think one of the things that I always found frustrating, and I think this is one of your differentiators, is that, CPAs, people that do your taxes and, get your quarterlies filed and all that jazz, they're really good at saying, there's a problem right there.
Yep.
Well, okay, Mr. CPA, how do I fix it? Well, I don't know how you fix it, but that's a big problem. And if you don't fix it, you're going to, have a problem with the IRS or whatever it is. And I think that's one of the things that you guys do is like problem. And here's the 3 things we need to accomplish to fix the problem, which will make the other 2 problems easier to accomplish. And then we get you to the 4 from the 2.
Yep.
Is that a big differentiator for you?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I always say not to knock CPAs there. I've run into some really smart CPAs, but to your point, the average CPA, they're so focused on the tax code and how to help save you money. But most business owners I know are first and foremost worried about making more money, not just saving money they've already made. And so that's a part of the equation we focus on. we can help keep an eye on some of the things that the CPA is working on to help save you money. We can help implement some of those strategies in your day to day. But yeah, absolutely. We're in the weeds going, okay, here's the problem. The problem is, cash flow. The problem is vendor payments. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go with you and reach out to these vendors, and we're going to renegotiate terms so you get a little more time to pay. Then we're going to go back and say, okay, are there other vendors? Part of that may be shopping to different vendors. So we're not in your business. Yeah, we're not in your business, but we're going to help advise you on the really down in the weeds tactical things that can be done to take that pressure off. And to your point, a CPA usually will go, yeah, I don't know, that number's higher than it used to be. You might want to look into that, right? The average business owner needs a whole lot more than you might want to look into that.
Yeah, like where, what door do I open? What bucket do I go look in? Yep. I mean, I used to have an adage. I had a small sign and graphics company, and I would tell my ops manager, it's like, you're going to see problems, you're going to identify problems, and you're going to bring them to me, but don't come to me empty-handed. Come to me with a couple ideas, right? Great solution is like, you solved the problem and you told me you solved it, right? That's best, but at least have a couple ideas on where to move forward. And that, I think, empowers people, right? To, maybe they can make good decisions as CEOs if they have good information. Yep. And like, you have a problem isn't good information. Like, here you have a problem. Here are the things that are causing the problem, and here's a couple of things we can start to do to mitigate those issues. And that's what I think if somebody's a 2 on your scale and they need to get to a 4 or 5, then that you're going to help them create the path, know which levers to pull to do it. And that
exactly,
there's an ROI there.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're a done with you service, right? We're not here's a list of 5 things you should do. Again, we don't want to be even a one step better version of what the CPAs are doing. We really get in there and work through it with you. And, to the extent we can, we do it for you. And to the extent we can't, we help advise you, look at it with you and support you all the way through.
Yeah. Awesome. So we've got a lot of business owners and CEOs that listen to this podcast. Hey, thanks for being part of the Sales and Cigar community. I wanted to share that I wrote a book, The 7 Critical Mistakes CEOs Make with Their Sales Organization. The CEOs who've read it tell me I cut to the chase quickly, get to the point, explain exactly what they're experiencing, why they're experiencing it, and how to fix it. So if you want a free copy, go check out the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the interview. We're no Joe Rogan, but we've got a pretty good audience. And so how do they know they're a candidate for you? Like, who's your ideal customer profile, right? What does that look like? How does somebody self-identify?
Well, for me, I've been in all different types of businesses. I've been in manufacturing businesses, professional services businesses, kind of most of the things in between. And so there's not a specific industry that we can or can't help. It really comes down to the entrepreneur. Like you said, it's typically going to be people who are, they understand the significance of the finances, but it's not their cup of tea, right? It's not their favorite part of business. And it's not an area, therefore, that they're dedicating a lot of time to. But they also have recognized they can't get where they want to go without it, right? And so that's the biggest thing. We're working with a lot of, as an example, digital marketing agencies, some IT companies, things like that, where they've got really good businesses. They've got a great product. They understand the ops side of their business, and they're passionate about helping sell it. But ultimately, you're never going to break through where you want to go, and without being, going from a 6 to a 7 to an 8-figure business, while acting like, the necessary evil financial part of the business isn't that important. You're just not going to get there. So that's who we're helping, companies that have come to that conclusion.
So it's the growth-minded CEO,
yep,
where he or she knows that they're not a financial wizard. They know it's important. They know it could be stopping them from whether it be an exit or to scale.
Yep.
You're industry agnostic, vertical agnostic, but is there a particular size? Like, you're not going to work with a startup. is there a minimum there that revenue wise or where they need to get to that makes sense, or
Yeah,
just about anybody?
Yeah, most of our clients are somewhere between, it's a pretty big range, but somewhere between 500,000 and 10 million in revenue.
Okay.
And so it really just depends on, again, kind of where they're at in the path and how fast they're growing, how fast, and we're significantly cheaper, the service we're providing, than, hiring someone to come in and do this for you full time. And frankly, most businesses don't need it full time. They can't
Right.
neglect it. So that's the key.
Yeah. Yeah. It can't be neglected, and you can fit into that small business to that just in the mid cap guys too. So
Yep.
I think that really helps. We're going to have website, we're going to have your LinkedIn, all that data in the show notes for people to reach out. But is there a best way? Is there a way in for people to kind of go poke around and touch base with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously check out our website. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's one I love because I'm really working hard on LinkedIn these days, putting a little bit of content out there, but also just loving to connect with other entrepreneurs. Whether someone thinks that they're a perfect fit, or they're interested in working with us, or they just want to connect. I love working with other business owners, other people in small business. And, one of the things that we offer is I'll hop on a call with someone for 45 minutes. It's a no pitch call. So when I say that, this is not like hey, I'm hopping on as your friend, and by the time we get to the end, I'm over here, twisting your arm trying to get you to buy something. It's really just, let's talk about your business. Let's do a deep dive into your biggest area of opportunity or weakness that you're trying to work on. And let me throw some advice at you, see what we can do to help. We found that to be a really good way to put, good karma out in the world. And, we know that clients ultimately come back, and it may be not the person we're talking to, but it may be their brother-in-law or, somebody they used to work with.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and I've used the no pitch. I've said, this is not a sales call. This is a chance to see if there's a way to help you. And sometimes help is working together, but more often than not, at the beginning, it's just giving you some ideas and resources to go back and look at, and see if there's a bigger problem or something you can solve. Right.
Yep.
I like just being the resource, and it sounds like you're putting stuff out on LinkedIn that's valuable. That's going to make people think. It's going to help educate, and I think that's part of what we need to do. Like you called it, putting good karma out in the world. But I think when we do that with the right intent, which can't be a shell game, it does do that, and it works short term and long term. So.
Absolutely.
So last question, past or present, any relationship with cigars? Got to get that in.
Yeah. So this is maybe not the most exciting answer, but I used to enjoy a cigar probably a couple times a year. I actually had a sinus surgery, and the sinus doctor was yelling at me about not don't smoke anything, basically, cigars or otherwise. And so I haven't been back, but I used to really enjoy that. I actually had my dog, who's no longer with us, but he used to sit out on the back patio with me, and I'd every so often smoke a cigar. So I'm envious of you still being in that game.
Yeah. What the hell does the sinus have to do with the cigar? Is it just a thing that he said, like bad, like don't do it, it's bad for you? Or
yeah, so there's something funky about the way my sinuses. I used to get a lot of sinus infections, a lot of colds, and again, I don't know the science of it, but he basically just said, "Hey, man, if you don't want to end up back in here," I had to go through a day surgery kind of deal, and he said, "Hey, if you don't want to be back in here, here's a list." And it wasn't just smoking things, but there was a few things like don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and you'll steer clear of me. And it was a highly unpleasant experience. So,
well, if you remember when COVID was first around, their way to test was to take a long ass Q-tip and tickle your brain with it. I mean that's unpleasant. Like just thinking about that, right?
Yes.
Just that was like, I don't want to do that. Sort of like going to the dentist. So I get it. Like doctor gave you reasons, don't do it. That's That's valid. But I do find them to be contemplative, if you will, from time to time.
Yeah.
Like you sit out on the back porch with the dog. I sit out on the back porch with a notebook, because my hands are occupied, but it allows my brain to kind of like work.
I love that.
So it's a rationalization, I know, but it's my rationalization.
No, hey, that's like what Tony Robbins calls that priming, right? Once you've done it and it's worked for you, and you can manifest that is effective, and you'll start coming up with good stuff just because you put yourself in that position.
Yeah, well, our brain is a pretty powerful tool, and if we ask it shitty questions, it gives us shitty answers, and if we ask it questions that allow us to open up our mind, open up our world, it's amazing how quickly that works.
No doubt.
That's one of the books that I read, Think and Grow Rich, on an annual basis, and it's like it's not so much like I didn't hear that before. It's like, oh, shit, I haven't been doing that right as a regular, and as soon as you start doing the thing, it starts falling back into place, and it becomes a habit, which becomes discipline, right? And as your focus, it just happens. So it's good stuff, Colin. I really appreciate the conversation. I would encourage. I don't care if you're a visionary or an integrator. You're out there and you got some sort of challenge that you need to get fixed in the finance area. Give Colin a call. It would click on the links in the bottom in the show notes. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Walter. Appreciate it.
I love sharing secrets when I figure them out. That's why I created this program called Sales Hiring Secrets. Early in my sales management career, I was terrible at hiring salespeople. They failed more often than not. Then I discovered the secret that you can't hire salespeople the same way you hire everyone else. That's why everyone fails. In Sales Hiring Secrets, I'm going to teach you all of the secrets to understanding what you really need your salesperson to do, how to attract an ideal candidate with a unique job posting. I'll teach you how to save time and money by only interviewing candidates that are a good fit. I'll share the secrets to an interviewing process that ensures success. And the one big secret that everybody gets wrong is how to onboard a good salesperson so they ramp up quickly and stick around. I'm doing the Sales Hiring Secrets program on a monthly basis. You can click the link below to figure out when the next Sales Hiring Secrets program is scheduled, and you can sign up. Click the link below, and you get all the details. And it's designed for you to bring your entire team so you can get everybody up to speed quickly. Thanks. Look forward to seeing you on the other side.